The main coalition fleet arrived exactly when the scouts had predicted. King Thexavar stood in his command center watching the tactical display fill with red enemy symbols. Hundreds of warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. The sight was terrifying and magnificent at the same time. 12 massive dreadnoughts led the fleet. Each one was large enough to destroy cities with a single blast. Behind them came 40 cruisers bristling with weapons. Over 200 smaller ships filled the spaces between the larger vessels. The coalition had brought enough firepower to level planets. General Carathul stood beside his king, trying to hide his fear. Even with human help, victory seemed impossible. The enemy had overwhelming numbers and superior technology. How could 5 specialists defeat such a force? Admiral Vextrath, the coalition commander, broadcast a message to the Vorthak homeworld. His voice came through the translation systems, cold and mechanical. People of the Vorthak Empire, your defeat is certain. Surrender now, and some of you may survive as workers. Resist, and we will turn your world into burning ash. King Thexavar started to reply with angry words, but Captain Yoon touched his arm. Not yet, your majesty. Let them think we are afraid and helpless. The coalition fleet began advancing through the system in perfect order. Their advanced scouts had already mapped every Vorthak defense position. The enemy knew exactly where each weapon platform and missile battery was located. They moved with the confidence of predators who had cornered their prey. But they did not know about the retribution hiding in the planet's shadow. Invisible to all sensors, for 18 hours, the coalition fleet moved steadily toward the inner system. They destroyed unmanned sensor posts and communication relays. They tested Vorthak defenses with long-range weapons. Everything proceeded according to their careful battle plan. Then Corporal Han's weeks of preparation paid off. At exactly midnight ship time, every coalition vessel received an emergency message. It came on their highest security channels using perfect military codes. The voice was Admiral Torketh himself, Supreme Commander of all coalition forces. All units, this is High Command. Return to staging positions immediately. Intelligence reports massive Terran fleet movement toward Nexus Prime. All invasion operations suspended pending threat assessment. Acknowledge and comply. Military training demanded instant obedience to orders from Supreme Command. Half the coalition fleet began turning around before anyone thought to question the message. It took 25 minutes for Admiral Vextrath to realize the communication was fake. By then it was far too late. The retribution emerged from hiding, while coalition forces were scattered and confused. Specialist O had spent the entire journey preparing special weapons using modified Vorthak energy crystals. The human ship targeted the coalition's command vessels with impossible accuracy. The first cruiser simply stopped working. Its engines went silent. Its weapons powered down. Its life support systems failed. The crew found themselves trapped in a metal coffin floating helplessly in space. The second target tried to raise shields, but the defensive barriers turned inward instead. The energy meant to protect the ship crushed the hull like squeezing an egg. Metal groaned and snapped as the vessel folded in on itself. The third ship managed to fire back, but its weapons targeted other coalition vessels instead of the human ship. Computer systems throughout the fleet began malfunctioning as O's viruses spread through their networks. Admiral Vextrath watched in growing horror as his perfectly organized fleet fell apart. His sensors could not understand what was happening. The human ship appeared to have no weapons, yet coalition vessels were being destroyed or disabled. All ships target the human vessel, he ordered desperately. Destroy it now. But Sergeant Kim had been studying coalition tactics for years. She knew how they formed up for battle and how they coordinated attacks. Now she used that knowledge against them. As coalition ships tried to target the retribution, they found themselves firing on their own forces instead. Kim had infiltrated their targeting computers, feeding them false information. Each ship's instruments showed its neighbors as enemy vessels. The result was complete chaos. Coalition ships attacked each other while the real enemy danced between them like a ghost, untouchable and deadly. Private Kang's contribution was quieter, but just as effective. 3 days earlier, he had somehow reached a coalition supply depot in a nearby system. He had replaced medical supplies with slow-acting nanobots that were now spreading through the fleet. Coalition soldiers began falling sick throughout the armada, not dying but becoming weak and confused. Medical officers could not identify the cause. The nanobots mimicked natural illness, making proper treatment impossible. Within 6 hours, 30% of coalition personnel were unfit for duty. Ships that should have had full crews were operating with skeleton staffs. But the most devastating attack came from Captain Yoon himself. He had spent the journey studying not just coalition ships and weapons, but their psychology and culture. He understood what they feared most. The Retribution broadcast a message on all frequencies. Yoon's voice was calm and reasonable as he spoke in perfect coalition common. Admiral Vextrath, this is Captain Yoon of the Terran Defense Force. You have exactly 15 minutes to withdraw all forces from this system. Impossible, Vextrath replied, his voice cracking with strain. You have one ship against hundreds. We outnumber you completely. Admiral, 3 years ago your forces accidentally destroyed a human research station. Do you remember what happened afterward? Vextrath felt his blood turn cold. Everyone in the coalition remembered that incident. 5 human ships had appeared at a coalition base and killed everyone there. No warnings. No negotiations. No survivors. Just death. That was different, Vextrath said, trying to sound confident. You were responding to an unprovoked attack. No, Yoon replied patiently. We were responding to the deaths of 47 human civilians. Today you are threatening 4 billion Vorthak civilians. How do you think we will respond to that? The communication channel filled with another voice. Admiral Park was speaking directly from Luna Station, his words carrying across the galaxy. Admiral Vextrath, this is Terran Command. You now have 14 minutes to begin withdrawal procedures. For every minute you remain in this system after the deadline, we will select one coalition homeworld and demonstrate why humans remain quarantined from galactic civilization. It was a complete bluff. The humans had no planet-killing weapons positioned near coalition space. They could not threaten entire worlds from this distance. But Admiral Vextrath had just watched one human ship cripple his fleet. If they could disable dozens of coalition vessels with apparent ease, what other weapons might they possess? More importantly, every species in the galaxy knew that humans were unpredictable. Other civilized races might make empty threats for diplomatic advantage. Humans might actually carry out their promises. You're bluffing, Vextrath said, but his voice lacked conviction. Yoon's response was patient and absolutely terrifying. Admiral, humans don't bluff about violence. We either commit to it completely or we don't. Would you like to discover which category this falls into? On coalition ships throughout the system, communication officers reported the same alarming information. Human signals were being detected near coalition homeworlds. Ships were moving in deep space. The entire Terran Defense Force seemed to be mobilizing for war. None of it was real. Corporal Han had planted false signals throughout the galactic communication network. But the coalition could not distinguish between genuine threats and manufactured deceptions. Admiral Vextrath stared at his tactical display. Half his fleet was retreating because of the false order. Another third was disabled or fighting each other because of human sabotage. His remaining ships were scattered and demoralized. He had 2 choices: continue the attack with a broken fleet against an enemy he could not understand, or retreat and face difficult questions from his superiors. The decision was easy. All coalition forces, begin immediate withdrawal, he commanded. Operation Vorthak is cancelled. We are returning to base. King Thexavar watched in amazement as the invasion fleet that had seemed unstoppable just hours before began turning around and leaving his system. Ships that had threatened to destroy his entire civilization were running away from 5 humans and 1 vessel. How is this possible? He whispered. Captain Yoon removed his helmet, revealing a young face that seemed far too ordinary for such an extraordinary victory. Your Majesty, you asked General Karathul to find you an army capable of defeating the coalition. But armies fight battles that may last for years. We ended your war in a single day. The journey back to Vorthak space took 8 days. General Karathul spent that time watching the 5 humans work. They did not behave like any soldiers he had ever seen. Instead of weapon drills or combat training, they focused entirely on information and planning. Captain Yoon studied coalition ship designs for hours each day. He memorized the locations of engines, weapons, and command centers on every type of vessel. He made careful notes about weak points and system vulnerabilities. When Lieutenant Vexcol asked about his work, he simply said, "Every enemy has flaws. You just need to find them." Sergeant Kim concentrated on battle tactics and troop movements. She watched recordings of coalition fights from the past 5 years. She learned how they positioned their forces and coordinated attacks between different species. She seemed to be looking for patterns that others had missed. Corporal Han worked with communication systems despite his young appearance. He was clearly an expert with electronic warfare. He studied coalition radio frequencies and security codes. He claimed he could break into their networks given enough time and the right equipment. Specialist O had somehow gained access to the Void Piercer's computer systems. He spent hours learning how Vorthak technology functioned. He was particularly interested in the ship's power crystals and energy distribution networks. He spoke to machines like they were old friends. Private Kang prepared medical supplies in an unusual way. He divided medicines into small portions and sealed them in special containers. He also studied coalition biology, learning about their physical weaknesses and pressure points. His work seemed more like preparing for assassination than healing. On the 6th day of the journey, King Thexvar contacted the Void Piercer directly. His angry purple face filled the main communication screen. All 4 of his arms moved in furious gestures. General Carthul, the king's voice cracked with rage. My scouts report that you return with only 5 aliens and 1 small ship. Where is the army I commanded you to find? Carthul felt his stomach drop. He had hoped to explain the situation in person when they arrived, but the king had run out of patience. Your Majesty, these are not ordinary soldiers. They are human specialists with unique capabilities. Humans? The king's voice rose to a roar. You brought me the forbidden species? The quarantined monsters? Have you lost your mind? Your Majesty, please allow me to explain. 5 primitives against 50 million coalition troops. The king's purple skin had turned dark with fury. This is your solution to our crisis? My lord, you have failed me, General. The king shouted. When you return, you will face trial for treason and incompetence. The communication ended abruptly. Carthul stood in stunned silence while his crew stared at him with worried expressions. He had risked everything on the humans, and now his own king considered him a traitor. Captain Yoon, who had been listening quietly from the back of the bridge, stepped forward. General, may I speak with your king? That would not be wise, Carthul replied. He is extremely angry right now. I can see that, Yoon said calmly. But he needs to understand what he's getting for his investment. Against his better judgment, Carthul opened another channel to the royal palace. King Thexvar's furious face appeared on screen again. When he saw the human captain, his expression became even darker. So this is the primitive who thinks he can save my empire, the king said with contempt. Captain Yoon bowed politely. Your Majesty, I understand your concerns. 5 soldiers do seem inadequate against such overwhelming odds. Then why are you here wasting my time and resources? Because you're thinking about this problem incorrectly, Yoon said. His voice remained calm and respectful. You don't need to defeat 50 million soldiers. You need to stop one invasion. What's the difference? The difference is in the targets, Yoon explained patiently. An army that size requires constant supply lines, communication networks, and command coordination. Destroy the right targets at the right time, and 50 million soldiers become 50 million confused people floating in space. King Thexvar was quiet for a moment, his forearms moving slowly as he considered this. And you believe 5 humans can destroy these critical targets? I believe 5 humans can end your war before it truly begins, Yoon replied. But only if you trust us to work in our own way. Your way? We don't fight fair, Your Majesty. We don't follow the established rules of civilized warfare. We do whatever is necessary to achieve victory. The king studied the human captain carefully. There was something in Yoon's quiet confidence that was both reassuring and frightening. What exactly are you planning? I'm sorry, but I cannot share those details, Yoon said. If your communications are being monitored by coalition agents, they might learn our strategy. But I can promise you this. In 4 days, either your war will be over or we will all be dead. King Thexvar's forearms moved slowly as he weighed his options. Finally, he spoke with reluctant acceptance. General Carthul, you have gambled our entire empire on these aliens. If they fail, you will die with honor defending our homeworld. If they succeed, he paused. Well, we can discuss rewards if any of us survive. The communication ended again, but this time the king seemed more thoughtful than angry. On the final day of the journey, the humans revealed some of their ship's true capabilities. The Retribution had been following the Void Piercer like a normal escort vessel, but when they dropped out of hyperspace near the Vorthak system, it seemed to vanish from all sensors. Stealth technology, Specialist O explained to Lieutenant Vexcol with a proud smile. Your sensors can only detect us when we want them to. But our scans showed your ship was unarmed, she protested. Your scans showed exactly what we programmed them to show, O replied. Reality and sensor readings are not always the same thing. As they approached the Vorthak homeworld, long-range scanners detected the Coalition advance fleet. 12 enemy ships had already arrived in the outer system. They were setting up sensor networks and communication relays, preparing the way for the main invasion force. Captain Yoon studied the tactical displays with interest. How long until their main fleet arrives? 48 hours, Carthel replied grimly. Perfect. That gives us time to prepare our welcome. Yoon turned to his team. Kim, I want complete analysis of their patrol patterns. Han, start working on penetrating their communication systems. Oh, prepare the special modifications we discussed. Kang, get your packages ready for deployment. What about the advance fleet? Carthel asked. Should we engage them now while their numbers are small? No, Yoon said firmly. Let them feel safe and confident. Let them establish their routines. Overconfident enemies make predictable mistakes. The Void Piercer docked at the main orbital station above the Vorthak homeworld. King Thexivar was waiting in the command center, surrounded by his military advisors and government officials. When the 5 humans entered the room, complete silence fell. The humans looked small and unremarkable compared to the tall Vorthak officers. They carried no visible weapons and wore simple uniforms. To most observers, they appeared harmless and ordinary. King Thexfar studied them with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. So you are the warriors who claim you can save my empire. We're not warriors, Your Majesty, Captain Yoon corrected politely. We're problem solvers. And what exactly is your solution to my problem? Yoon walked to the main tactical display showing Coalition positions throughout the system. The Coalition is following standard invasion procedures. They'll secure the outer system first, then move inward to establish orbital control. After that, they'll begin bombing military targets to soften resistance before landing ground forces. Yes, the king agreed. This matches exactly what our military analysts predicted. The problem is that standard tactics require standard responses, Yoon continued. They're expecting you to fight a defensive battle according to accepted military doctrine. They've prepared for that scenario. What are you suggesting instead? Captain Yoon smiled, and for the first time, King Thexivar began to understand why the galaxy feared humans. There was something in that expression that spoke of violence and chaos barely held in check. I'm suggesting we give them something they're completely unprepared for, Yoon said quietly. Something that will make them remember why humans are kept in quarantine. General Carthul stared at the tactical display on his ship's bridge. 6 human vessels had appeared around the Void Piercer like hunting wolves. They were much smaller than his scout ship, but something about them made his crew nervous. The human technology was unlike anything in the galactic databases. Admiral Park, Carthul said into the communication system, trying to keep his voice steady. I apologize for entering your space without permission, but my people are desperate. We need help. There was a long pause. The human ships held their positions in a perfect circle around his vessel. Carthul could feel sweat on his purple skin as he waited for a response. General, Admiral Park finally replied, you've broken laws that exist for good reasons. The Sol system has been quarantined to protect both humans and the rest of the galaxy. We don't welcome visitors. I understand the risks, Carthul said. But in 50 days, the Nexus Coalition will destroy my empire. They have 50 million soldiers and planet-killing ships. Without help, 4 billion of my people will die. Another pause. Carthul wondered what the humans were discussing on their private channels. Were they deciding whether to help him or kill him? His tactical officer whispered urgently, Sir, their weapons are locked onto us. I can't get clear readings on their technology. Carthul nodded but kept his attention on the communication. Everything depended on the next few minutes. General, Admiral Park said, dock your ship at Luna Station. Bring only yourself and 1 aide. No weapons, no recording devices, no surprises. If you try anything clever, we'll demonstrate why the galaxy keeps us locked away. Do you understand? I understand completely, Carthul replied. Luna Station was built into Earth's moon. As the Void Piercer approached, Carthul studied the structure through the viewports. It looked like a simple trading post, but his military training told him otherwise. The weapon emplacements were hidden but present. The docking bays could be sealed in seconds. Every part of the station was designed for defense. Carthul chose Lieutenant Vexcol as his aide. She was young but smart, and she knew when to keep quiet. Together, they took a small shuttle to the station. The docking bay was clean and efficient. Human workers secured their shuttle quickly and professionally. But Carthul noticed that every human he saw carried weapons. Even the mechanics had pistols on their belts. These people lived ready for war. A human soldier met them at the airlock. She was tall for her species, with short black hair and alert eyes. Her uniform was simple but well-maintained. A scar ran across her left cheek. "I'm Captain Lee," she said in Galactic Common. "Admiral Park is waiting for you. Follow me and stay close." They walked through corridors that seemed normal at first glance, but Carthul's experienced eye spotted the defensive features. Every doorway had blast shields that could drop in an instant. Every corridor had alcoves where defenders could take cover. The humans had turned their station into a fortress. Captain Lee led them to a conference room. The space was plain and functional, with a simple table and chairs. No decorations. No artwork. Just the basics needed for business. Admiral Park was waiting inside. He was smaller than Carthul had expected, but there was something about his presence that filled the room. His dark eyes seemed to see everything. His movements were controlled and precise. This was a man who had seen combat and survived. Captain Lee stood beside him. Carthul noticed that her left arm was cybernetic. The mechanical limb moved smoothly, but the metal showed battle damage. She had been fighting recently. "Sit down, General," Admiral Park said. He gestured to chairs across from him. "Tell me about your problem." Carthul explained everything. The approaching coalition fleet. The impossible odds. The certain death of his people if no help came. Admiral Park listened without showing emotion. His face remained calm and neutral. 50 million troops, Captain Lee said when the general finished. 12 different species working together. Planet-killing dreadnoughts. She looked at Admiral Park with a slight smile. "Sounds like a Tuesday." Admiral Park nodded slowly. "We can help you, General. But not in the way you expect. What do you mean?" "You came here looking for an army," Park explained. "You want millions of soldiers to fight millions of soldiers. That's not how we work." "Then how do you work?" "We solve problems," Captain Lee said. Her smile was not comforting. "Usually in permanent ways." Admiral Park stood and walked to a wall display. It showed star charts of the local sector, with the Vorthak Empire highlighted in blue and Coalition territory marked in red. "We'll provide 5 specialists and 1 ship," he said. "Payment is 30% of your Empire's refined energy crystals delivered before we begin work." Carthul stared at him. 5 soldiers? Against 50 million enemies? Are you serious? "Do I look like someone who jokes about war?" Park asked. His voice remained calm, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "But how can 5 people defeat an entire invasion fleet?" "The same way 5 human ships destroyed a coalition base 2 years ago," Captain Lee said. "The same way 3 human ships ended the war between the Krell and the Vorlons. The same way 1 human ship convinced the Andromedans to abandon their invasion plans." Carthul had heard whispers about those events, but he had thought they were just stories. "Those are legends, myths, are they?" Admiral Park pressed a control, and the wall display changed. It now showed battle footage from space. Carthul watched 3 small human ships attack over 100 enemy vessels. The human ships moved like living creatures, appearing and disappearing, striking without warning. In 1 hour, the enemy fleet was destroyed or scattered. "That was the Krell-Vorlon conflict," Captain Lee explained. "Both sides had been fighting for 20 years. They hired us to end it quickly." "We did." Carthul studied the tactical display. The movements made no sense by normal military standards. The human ships had been outnumbered 40 to 1, yet they had won easily. "How is this possible?" "Because we think differently than other species," Admiral Park said. "You follow rules of civilized warfare. You make logical battle plans and execute them carefully. We break rules. We do things that shouldn't work but do." "Your coalition enemies are expecting a normal war," Captain Lee added. "They're bringing massive force because that's how advanced civilizations fight. But we're not civilized. We're predators who learn to use technology." Admiral Park sat down again. "So, General, do you want our help? Because frankly, we have other projects waiting." Carthul felt trapped between impossible choices. 5 humans seemed like nothing against the coalition war machine, but these same humans had clearly done impossible things before. And what alternative did he have? What guarantee do I have that you can succeed? None, Admiral Park replied bluntly. But what guarantee do you have without us? Your empire dies either way if we fail. At least with us you have a chance. The logic was harsh but accurate. Carthul took a deep breath and made his decision. I accept your terms. Admiral Park smiled for the first time since the meeting began. It was not a reassuring expression. Excellent. Your specialist will be ready in 2 hours. 2 hours later, 5 humans boarded the Void Piercer. They were not what Carthul had expected from the galaxy's most feared warriors. Captain Yoon was quiet and thoughtful, with scarred hands that suggested he knew how to use tools and weapons. Sergeant Kim was a woman who smiled frequently, but her eyes remained cold and calculating. Corporal Han looked barely 20 years old, too young for serious combat. Specialist O was thin and pale, clearly more comfortable with computers than people. Private Kang carried medical supplies, but something about his equipment bag suggested it held more than healing items. Their ship followed the Void Piercer as they left the Sol system. The human vessel was called Retribution. It looked fast and sleek, but Carthul's sensors reported no weapons. He strongly suspected his sensors were being fooled. During the journey back to Vorthak space, the general tried to learn more about his new allies. They were polite but secretive. They spent their time studying data about coalition forces, asking detailed questions about Vorthak technology and defenses. The most unsettling thing was how relaxed they seemed. Carthul had seen soldiers before many battles. Most showed nervousness or excitement. These humans acted like they were going to a routine training exercise, not a war that would determine the fate of an empire. As they traveled through hyperspace, Carthul wondered if he had made the biggest mistake of his life. He was bringing 5 humans to face the greatest military force in the galaxy. But then he remembered the battle footage Admiral Park had shown him. Maybe the biggest mistake would have been not asking for their help. The great throne room of the Vorthak Empire was silent except for the soft hum of energy crystals. King Thexvar sat on his black stone throne, his 4 purple arms gripping the armrests. His eyes glowed with worry as he stared at the holographic display floating before him. The display showed star maps marked with red warning symbols. Each symbol meant the same thing: enemy forces approaching. General Carthul walked slowly across the polished floor. His heavy boots echoed in the vast chamber. The general's purple skin was scarred from many battles. His armor bore dents and scratches from 30 years of war. He had served his king faithfully through good times and bad. Now he could see in the king's face that the worst news was coming. "My lord," Carthul said as he knelt before the throne, "you summoned me." King Thexvar touched a control on his throne. The holographic display changed to show enemy ship formations. Hundreds of vessels moved in perfect lines across the star chart. The sight made Carthul's heart sink. "The Nexus Coalition is coming," the king said. His voice was cold and hard. "Our spies report that their fleet has left the staging area. They will be here in 60 rotations." Carthul studied the display. The coalition was made up of 12 different alien species. They had joined together to conquer other empires. In the past 5 years, they had destroyed 3 neighboring kingdoms. They showed no mercy to those who surrendered. "How many ships?" the general asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Over 300 warships," the king replied, "including 12 planet killers." The general felt cold fear in his stomach. Planet killers were massive ships that could destroy entire worlds from orbit. The Vorthak Empire had never faced such weapons before. "What are your orders, my lord?" King Thexvar stood up from his throne. All 4 of his arms moved in angry gestures. "I did not build this empire just to watch it burn, General. My father conquered 6 star systems. I added 11 more. I will not be the king who loses everything. My lord, our military strength is 2 million soldiers. The coalition has over 50 million troops. Even with our best defenses, I don't want to hear about our limitations." The king roared. "I want solutions. Find me an army, General. Find me warriors who can defeat the coalition." Carthul wanted to laugh at the impossible order. Where could he find such an army? Every mercenary group in the galaxy was either too small or already hired by their enemies. The few independent worlds with strong militaries would never risk war with the coalition. "My lord, with respect, such an army does not exist. No one in the galaxy has the power to stop the coalition. The king's eyes blazed with fury. Then look beyond the galaxy. Search the outer rim. Search the forbidden zones. Search the dead worlds if you must. But bring me warriors who can win this war. The forbidden zones. Carthul felt a chill at those words. There were sectors of space that were marked as off-limits by galactic law. Most contained dangerous phenomena like black holes or radiation storms, but some were forbidden for other reasons. My lord, the forbidden zones are dangerous. Most ships that enter never return. Then you had better be careful, the king said. You have 60 rotations to find me an army. If you fail, we will all die defending our homeworld, but we will die with honor. Carthul bowed his head. Yes, my lord. As he walked out of the throne room, the general's mind raced. He had fought in dozens of campaigns across the galaxy. He knew when a battle could be won and when it was hopeless. Against the Nexus Coalition, the Vorthak Empire had no chance with conventional forces. But the king had mentioned the forbidden zones. A memory came back to him from 2 years ago. He had been in a cantina on a trading station near the edge of known space. A cargo pilot had been telling stories about the restricted sectors. The pilot had been drunk, but his words had been clear. He spoke of a species so dangerous that entire regions of space had been quarantined. The pilot called them humans. According to the story, humans came from a world called Earth in something called the Sol System. They had tried to join the galactic community once, but something had gone wrong. A human research station had been destroyed by accident during a coalition training exercise. The human response had been swift and terrible. 5 human ships had appeared at the coalition base responsible for the accident. In less than 1 hour, they had reduced the entire facility to burning metal. Thousands of soldiers and civilians had died. No survivors, no prisoners, no negotiations. The humans had simply killed everyone and left. After that incident, the galaxy had made a collective decision. Humans were too dangerous to be allowed into civilized space. Their home system had been marked as a quarantine zone. No trade, no contact, no visits, but the pilot had whispered something else. He claimed that humans were still out there. They had ships. They had weapons. And they might be willing to work as mercenaries if someone was desperate enough to ask. Carthul walked to the military spaceport where his ship was waiting. The Void Piercer was a fast scout vessel built for long-range missions. His crew was already preparing for departure, though they didn't know where they were going. Sir, his second-in-command asked. What are our orders? Set course for the Sol system, Carthul said quietly. The officer's purple face went pale. Sir, that's in the quarantine zone. We're not allowed to go there. I know, the general said. Plot the course anyway. Word spread quickly through the ship that they were heading for forbidden space. The crew whispered nervously as they worked. Everyone knew the stories about humans. Everyone knew why the Sol system was off limits. But they also knew that their empire was doomed without help. Maybe dealing with the galaxy's most feared species was better than certain death at the hands of the Coalition. The Void Piercer launched from the spaceport and jumped into hyperspace. The journey to the Sol system would take 10 days. During that time, Carthul studied every piece of information he could find about humans. There wasn't much data available. Most records had been classified after the quarantine began. But he learned some basic facts. Humans were smaller than most galactic species. They came from a heavy gravity world with dangerous weather. They had evolved as hunters, tracking and killing other animals for food. Most disturbing was how they thought. Other intelligent species made careful plans based on logic and reason. Humans seemed to make decisions based on emotion and instinct. They were unpredictable. They did things that made no sense to other species, but somehow their crazy ideas often worked. As the ship traveled through hyperspace, Carthul wondered if he was making a terrible mistake. The king had ordered him to find an army. Instead, he was going to ask the galaxy's boogeyman for help. If the humans said no, his trip would be wasted. If they said yes, he might be making a deal with monsters. But what choice did he have? In 50 days, the Coalition would arrive. In 50 days, his people would start dying. The Void Piercer dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Immediately, alarm signals filled the bridge. The crew reported multiple contacts moving toward them at high speed. Human ships. Armed and ready for battle, Carthul activated the communication system. He sent a message in the standard galactic trade language, hoping the humans would understand. This is General Carthul of the Vorthak Empire. I come seeking an audience. I come with an offer of employment. The response came quickly. A voice spoke in perfect galactic common. The accent was strange, but the words were clear. And there was something in that voice that made Carthul's skin crawl. It was calm and controlled, but underneath was something cold and dangerous. This is Admiral Park of the Terran Defense Force. You have violated quarantine restrictions, General. State your business immediately or prepare to be destroyed. 3 months after the Coalition retreat, the story had spread across the entire galaxy. In cantinas and trading posts on distant worlds, beings of every species told the tale of how 5 humans had defeated an army of 50 million soldiers. Each telling made the story bigger and more incredible. Some claimed the humans had used weapons that could destroy stars with a single shot. Others insisted they possessed mind control technology that turned enemies into loyal servants. A few whispered that humans could travel through time and change the past to ensure their victories. All the stories were wrong in their details, but they served an important purpose. The galaxy now remembered why humans were quarantined, and why that quarantine must never be broken. Admiral Vextrath stood before a military tribunal on the Coalition capital world. The Great Hall was filled with representatives from 12 different species. Each one wanted to understand how he had failed so completely, with such overwhelming advantages. You commanded over 300 warships, accused General Morketh of the Krellian Empire. You had 50 million soldiers ready for deployment. How could 5 primitives from a quarantined world defeat your entire armada? Vextrath had asked himself the same question every day since the humiliating retreat. They did not fight like civilized beings. They ignored every established rule of warfare. Rules exist to create order and prevent unnecessary destruction, snapped Admiral Texanora of the Andromedan Union. All intelligent species follow these principles. Humans are not like other species, Vextrath replied quietly. They think in ways that we cannot predict or understand. They see possibilities that our minds cannot grasp. The tribunal was not impressed by his explanations. Admiral Vextrath was stripped of all ranks and sent to a prison colony on the rim of known space. But his warnings about human capabilities were quietly filed away in classified military archives throughout Coalition territory. On Earth, Admiral Park received a very different kind of report. Captain Yoon and his team had returned to Luna Station 5 days after their victory. Their mission debriefing was brief and professional as always. Mission accomplished. Yoon reported simply, the Coalition has withdrawn all forces from Vorthak space. Our intelligence sources suggest they have also canceled planned operations against the Rigel Federation and the Centauri Republic. Casualties on our side? Admiral Park asked. None. All team members returned without injury. Enemy casualties? Approximately 400 Coalition personnel suffered temporary illness from Kang's nanobots. Complete recovery expected within 3 weeks. No permanent injuries or deaths. Admiral Park nodded with approval. This was how humans preferred to conduct warfare. Maximum psychological impact with minimal actual violence. Dead enemies created martyrs and blood feuds that could last for generations. Humiliated enemies usually just wanted to forget what had happened and move on. Payment status? Delivered as promised, Yoon replied. 30% of the Vorthak Empire's energy crystal production for the next 5 years. The crystals were valuable and useful, but they were not the real reason Earth had helped the Vorthaks. The true payment was strategic. Now every empire in the galaxy would think twice before making aggressive moves. The balance of power had shifted without firing a single shot in anger. On the Vorthak homeworld, King Thexvar was dealing with the unexpected consequences of his victory. Delegations from dozens of worlds were requesting formal audiences. Everyone wanted to know how he had defeated the mighty Nexus Coalition, with apparently minimal losses. General Carthul had been promoted to Supreme Military Advisor. His desperate gamble with the humans had transformed him from a potential traitor into a celebrated hero. But he found his new fame uncomfortable and worrying. Your Majesty, he said during a private meeting, these constant diplomatic visitors are becoming a serious problem. Half of them want military alliances against the Coalition. The other half want to hire human mercenaries for their own conflicts. King Thexvar nodded thoughtfully. What should we tell them? The truth. That we were extremely fortunate to survive our encounter with both the Coalition and the humans. That dealing with humans is dangerous even when they are supposedly helping you. But Carthul's warnings could not stop the spreading rumors and speculation. Within 6 months, 3 different empires had sent secret diplomatic missions toward the Sol system. None of them made it past the quarantine zone. Human patrol ships intercepted them and turned them back with polite but absolutely firm warnings. The message was always identical. Earth remains closed to outside contact. If we need to communicate with you, we will initiate the conversation. This policy only made humans seem more mysterious and powerful in the minds of other species. Civilizations that could not be reached or influenced were automatically assumed to possess godlike capabilities. On a trading station near the Galactic Rim, an old cargo pilot named Kektal was telling stories to anyone willing to buy him drinks. He claimed to have been near Vorthak space during the Great Battle, though no one could verify his story. I saw it with my own eyes, he insisted to a group of young spacers from various worlds. One tiny human ship against hundreds of coalition vessels. The humans didn't even use conventional weapons. They just made the enemy fleet stop working. A young Andromedan pilot looked skeptical. That's impossible. Modern warships have multiple backup systems, heavy armor, and energy shields. You can't just disable them with some kind of magic. Tell that to Admiral Vextrath, Kektal replied with a knowing smile. His fleet was the finest in coalition space. Now he's breaking rocks on a prison asteroid. The young spacers bought the old pilot another drink and pressed him for more details. But Kektal had told them everything he actually knew. The rest was speculation, fear, and the natural human tendency to make stories more dramatic with each retelling. In the secret archives of the Galactic Institute, xenobiologist Dr. Narveth was writing a research report that would never be published. Her subject was human psychology and behavior patterns, and her conclusions were deeply disturbing to most civilized minds. The majority of intelligent species develop advanced civilization by controlling and suppressing their violent instincts, she wrote in her private notes. Humans appear to have achieved technological advancement by channeling their violent instincts into more sophisticated and effective forms. They do not fight to defend territory, resources, or even survival as other species do. They seem to fight primarily to prove that their methods of thinking are superior to those of their opponents. This makes them uniquely dangerous, because they will never stop developing new ways to win conflicts. Dr. Narveth's report was classified at the highest security levels immediately after submission. The Galactic Institute decided that some knowledge was too dangerous to share with the general population. But information has a way of spreading, despite official attempts at secrecy. Within 1 year, the basic facts of the Vorthak incident were known throughout civilized space. The specific details were often wrong or exaggerated, but the important message was clear. Humans could not be defeated through conventional military methods. This realization had unexpected consequences across the galaxy. 3 minor wars ended abruptly when one side threatened to seek human assistance. A long-running territorial dispute between the Rigel Federation and the Centauri Republic was resolved through peaceful negotiation after both governments realized that hiring human mercenaries would be too expensive and too dangerous. Pirates and raiders began avoiding any cargo. Convoys rumored to have human escorts. Slave traders stopped operating in star systems anywhere near the Sol quarantine zone. The mere possibility of human intervention was enough to change behavior patterns across multiple sectors of space. Captain Yoon knew nothing about these wider effects as he prepared for his next assignment. The Retribution was being refitted with improved stealth systems and more advanced electronic warfare equipment. "Where are we going this time?" Sergeant Kim asked as she reviewed new mission briefings. "The Outer Rim territories," Yoon replied calmly. "Corporate warfare between 3 mining companies has gotten out of control. They're shooting at each other instead of negotiating reasonable contracts." "How many ships are involved in the fighting?" Corporal Han asked with professional interest. "Approximately 200 vessels spread across 5 different star systems." Private Kang looked up from organizing his medical and special equipment. "Same basic approach as the coalition job?" "Modified for the target," Yoon explained. "Corporate executives think differently than military officers. They care more about profit margins and stock prices than honor or military glory." Specialist O was already studying technical specifications for corporate mining equipment and security systems. "Should be easier than the coalition operation. Corporate security forces aren't usually as paranoid or well-trained as regular military units." The 5 humans continued their mission preparations with quiet professionalism. To them, it was simply another job assignment. They would travel to the Outer Rim, solve what others considered an impossible problem, and return home. The fact that their solution would become another legend was completely irrelevant to them.